Hi everyone, we are back for another chapter reading of my book, Ticcing My Way Through Life. Last time we read chapter 8, and this week we are on chapter 9, My Struggle with Accepting Medication. This is something that I've struggled with my entire life, having Tourette syndrome, and it's something that I would still probably struggle with today if I was told that medication would be a good idea for me again. This came up last year for me. I got very, very close to needing to be on it again. I got on anxiety medication instead, actually, because that was more of the problem, but story for another day. Anyways, let's get into it. Taking a pill to feel normal is one of the hardest decisions I had to come to terms with throughout this journey. I always prided myself on strength, resilience, and having a positive attitude when it came to my disorder. When it comes to my mild case, most of the time I've been able to figure out my non-medical way to cope with my body moving uncontrollably. My mom and I both agreed at a young age that that little orange bottle was something that I didn't need. But then my senior year of high school rolled around and my tics sort of took over my life. There was so much going on in my life, good and bad. It was hard to face it all on my own. Emotions of any kind tend to exacerbate tics for a lot of people, and for me, stress and anxiety have always been my biggest contributing factors to bad tic days. I was worried about college coming up, what to major in, what school to go to, and my consideration to take a year off before I started. I was finishing what I thought was my last year of dance, which brought an overwhelming amount of emotions, as dance was my one safe place from the tics. Because of all of this, my Tourette's fed off the increased stress I had throughout the year. It wasn't until I found myself crying in my mom's lap every night. It wasn't until I found myself crying in my mom's lap almost every night for a few weeks straight that I realized that medication was my only option. I remember walking out to the backyard, looking for her for comfort after another terrible day, when I looked up at her with tears in my eyes and said, "I think I need to look at my options for medication." She didn't even have to say anything. We both knew I had to at least try. My mom never thought medication was necessary, and I can't blame her for coming to that conclusion. When I was 7, my only options were to take a pill in hopes that it would decrease my tics, but then I would have to take another one just to offset some of the side effects from the first. It was going to be a terrible domino effect, and my mother did not want me to have to go through that if it wasn't absolutely necessary. I was a child, and she didn't want to see me go through even more on top of what the tics would already do to me. But as I got older, she let me make that decision because it was ultimately up to me, and I knew my body best. We talked about it, and she gave me her input, but ultimately the decision was up to me. It was my life, and only I knew how bad things were mentally and physically. I didn't struggle with this decision because I see something wrong with medication or anything of that sort. It has helped so many people in so many different ways, and it's amazing what science has done. But for me, taking a pill meant I was giving up. I would often think to myself, if I need help, then that means I'm not as strong as I constantly tell myself that I am. I beat myself up over the decision, even though deep down I knew it was what I needed to do, if I wanted any kind of resemblance of a life. So I made the appointment and waited through the fight with my mind mentally for 4 months before I finally got to see my neurologist again. I worked on breathing exercises with my mom, practiced my dances a lot, and did everything I could to keep my mind concentrated on anything other than the tics, until I was able to get some medicated help. Looking back, I shake my head at those thoughts and doubts because in reality, it took more strength to overcome those fears and make that decision for myself. I was on a medication called Topamax throughout my entire senior year of high school. It's important to keep in mind that there is no cure for Tourette syndrome, so my tics did not disappear completely, but the medication was a huge help and gave me a break that I was hoping for, but at a cost. The side effects were awful, especially in the beginning. I was taking nausea medicine daily to combat the constant stomach aches that I faced while my body adjusted. Additionally, I would get a tingly, prickly feeling throughout my fingers and my toes. You know how when your hands and feet fall asleep and they wake back up, it feels being poked by 1,000 tiny little needles? It doesn't necessarily hurt, but it's super uncomfortable. That's how it would feel during random parts of my day. I never knew when it was going to happen, but there was never a day where it didn't happen. After the excitement for my senior year died down, I weaned off my medication and was pill-free for about a year. After a lot of consideration, I decided to take a year off school before I started college. I've always been the type to get stressed out easily, and after everything my body went through, it seemed like the right choice for me. I naively thought that I was going to get lucky and make it through my college career without having to turn to my medication. Ultimately, working full-time while going to school full-time caught up to me, and my tics were at an all-time high. I was ticking constantly because there was always something for me to be stressed and worried about. I was balancing what most college students do with the added weight of Tourette syndrome, so the time came where I had to make a tough decision yet again. I talked to my mom about it again, and my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, listening to their opinions and taking to heart everything they had to say. They didn't want to tell me what to do because they knew how hard it was for me to accept, but thankfully let me vent and cry to them when the decision was too much for me to think about. And after my now husband proposed to me and I added planning a wedding, moving out, and buying a home into the mix, I knew I had no other option. Some people don't always realize what physical and emotional pain a person can go through while living with Tourette syndrome. Having no control over what my body is doing is hard to cope with, especially on the days where it feels like my body is never going to give me a break. There have been tears shed, muscle aches, headaches, stomach aches, and many more over the years with this disorder. As I grew into adulthood and started to have more stressors and excitement in my life, my tics began to increase. I remember getting so angry about it because all my life I've been told that they would get better as I got older, and it seemed like it was the complete opposite for me. Why couldn't they go away like I was told they were going to do? I was getting worse as I was getting older, and I just kept thinking, this isn't fair. This was when I was supposed to get my body back. So it made it that much harder for me to admit yet again that I needed help. I was on medication throughout the rest of my college career, and when I think back on it, I don't think I would have been able to cope without it. I had so many things going on in my life that there was never a day where my tics didn't make themselves known. I had so many life-changing things happening at once, so the excitement kept building, and not using medication just wasn't an option at that point. It took a long time to realize that taking a pill didn't take away from the strength I like to think that I had, but made me that much stronger to admit that I couldn't do it alone anymore. Actually, in retrospect, that was probably one of my strongest moments when it came to my disorder. I had to put my pride aside and admit something I never wanted to admit, that I couldn't do it on my own, and that was okay. For me, my disorder is both my biggest weakness and my biggest strength. No parent or child wants to be on medication, but when it's starting to become both emotionally and physically draining, you're often left with no other choice. I encourage everyone to look at all their options and find something that gives them relief in their lives. I know now that it doesn't mean you're giving up or that you're weak. It means you're strong enough to admit that you need help. There are so many other medications out there that treat and help disorders that interfere with day-to-day life, and no one bats an eye when it comes to taking those. But when it comes to mental health or even Tourette syndrome, the stigma seems to come with it. The stigma of needing a pill to get through my day weighed heavily on my mind, and it's what made me so hesitant to admit that I needed it. But it's perfectly okay that I did. Someone once told me that you wouldn't expect a mechanic to work without any tools, and taking medication to get by is the same thing. It was such a simple comparison, but it was like a light bulb going off in my head. We all have our struggles, and we all need the right tools to get the job done. That was chapter 9. I hope you enjoyed that one. Remember, if you do not have your copy of Taking My Way Through Life yet, it is available online anywhere where books are sold. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, on websites for bookstores. But remember, please, when you buy it, to please leave a written review of the book. It helps authors like myself so much and helps the book be recommended way more. So please remember to do that part of it. And thank you so much for listening. Until next time.